Thank you.
The next on our agenda is the Environmental Patriots of the New River Valley. Initially, Ms. Bledsoe was signed up, but I believe, is it Mr. Murray? Moore, excuse me. Mr. Moore is going to make the presentation on their behalf.
Thank you, Chairman Tuck, and thank you, the board, for another opportunity to speak with you. And I want to congratulate you on your vote, your unanimous vote last month on testing our water for perchlorate. I really appreciate that, and I admire all the good work you do. I did come here tonight to talk about this, our beautiful New River Valley, and I appreciate our neighbors from the Chamber of Commerce of reminding us how attractive this area is to outsiders, and that's something we want to continue. And I wanted to talk about this little lazy bend of the New River, but I then also learned that you're going to speak about compensation for officers of election tonight. And since I've been an officer of election and precinct chief for the past 13 years, I'm going to speak about that instead. Just kidding. Sorry.
I think she just fell over in the chair.
I just want to thank them for their work. Just a little bit of history, and I am going to rush through these first few slides because we have discussed some of this before, but I'm leaving the presentation that you can view at your leisure. Since 1941, the Radford Arsenal has been instrumental in providing our fighting men and women with the best munitions possible to defend our nation. And we also recognize the sacrifice of thousands of men and women from Montgomery County and surrounding region who have dedicated their lives to building the success of the Radford Arsenal. The main area of concern is for the past 75 years, the Arsenal, who has access to the most modern technology, still employs primitive practices of open burning of hazardous munitions waste along the bank of the New River and direct releases into groundwater and the New River, which results in the needless release of toxins into the air, water, and soil of Montgomery County and surrounding regions. Also of concern is in recent years, they've been disposing of the waste of commercial, non-military tenants who enjoy the unique shield of reduced environmental regulation and enforcement given to Department of Defense sites. So again, a lot of needless waste being released into our valley, which is not related to national defense. We want to make sure that the national defense operations can continue without having a serious impact. In 1999, not many people know that the Arsenal was listed as a Superfund site, yet within a year it was quietly recategorized because, to quote the EPA, there were concerns that a Superfund listing would decrease the economic potential in this area. Since 2001, production and toxic releases have reached record levels. In 2011, a new Arsenal operator, actually not an American company, but a British arms dealer, was given the contract to operate the Arsenal. And we did welcome them to our community, despite the fact that a year earlier, they were fined by the Justice Department $400 million for knowingly and willfully making false statements to U.S. government agencies, which they considered a criminal fine. Also, more recently, 2011 and 2014, the EPA has been out for inspections, finding multiple violations of their environmental permits, Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act, and toxic release inventory reporting. None of these violations have been seen any enforcement action since that time. Also alarming is the shift of responsibility from the federal EPA to the Commonwealth's DEQ, which has much more limited enforcement of federal laws, as was proven in Flint, Michigan recently, where a state environmental agency took over responsibility from the EPA and proved its ineffectiveness at enforcing federal regulations. Unfortunately, this means that Montgomery County is #1. According to the Richmond Times, in terms of Virginia localities leading in toxic emissions, we're #1 as far as 9.1 million pounds, which beats the next 3 counties combined. And as we discussed last week, we're getting some serious releases of carcinogens, mutagens, which mutate DNA, and teratogens, which deform fetuses. If you look to the far right, we are among the top facilities, not only in the Commonwealth, but in the nation, in terms of toxic releases. The Army itself uses a 50-mile radius for its risk assessment, so that includes not only all of the New River Valley, but all the surrounding counties, over 800,000 people, over 40,000 children under 5. If we narrow that significantly to a 10-mile radius, that includes all of Blacksburg, Christiansburg, Reiner, Radford, over 111,000 people, and over nearly 5,000 children under 5. Our site was chosen by government planners in 1940 after a massive flood, where they observed that the floodwater disappeared very quickly. The arsenal was sited on porous karst geology, which allows unrestrained disposal of toxins into numerous sinkholes. Fortunately, that practice no longer continues, but it did for many decades. And that's the reason why even today our water authorities are compelled every year to put warnings about the source of our drinking water. The Radford Arsenal also lies adjacent to the Pulaski Fault. You see that black curved line, that actually captures and channels the releases from the arsenal. This karst topography enables transfer of fluids and vapors, forming a potential conduit to groundwater, wells, and basements. And just a quick graph here. This is showing, we're talking about perchlorate again. The reason we talk about that is because it's exclusively produced by explosives manufacturers. So the only source in our region is from the arsenal. And the arsenal found in their own testing of wells inside the arsenal, we see from 2007 to 2010, where the percentage in red of sites finding perchlorate has increased to 100%, whereas the total number of samples continue to decrease. Again, an example of weakened enforcement by the Department of Environmental Quality. Even more alarming, in 2013, the New River Valley Sierra Club found perchlorate in 4 out of 5 private wells outside the facility, which refutes perpetual arsenal claims that nothing is leaving the site of the arsenal. And even according to the DOD's own regulations, which specifically addresses the Radford Arsenal, since 2007, they've been saying that they will do a risk assessment for perchlorate in our community. The reason this is so concerned that when people consume food and contaminated drinking water, even with small amounts of perchlorate, it can disrupt the functions of the thyroid, especially in fetuses, infants, and young children. So it was really alarming to see this report from the National Cancer Institute that thyroid cancer rates in the New River Valley are among the highest in the Commonwealth. Again, thyroid disease is almost exclusively caused by environmental toxins. Virginia Tech's been impacted. Both their dairy production and food production for the dining halls are directly across the river from the Radford Arsenal, where there are 17 outfalls into the New River. Also, their well water has never been tested for chlorate. So we talked about the water, but the one area where we can have the biggest impact is with the open burning. You see here the site directly along the New River, where open burning has continued for the past 75 years. It's an open-air site used to burn waste from munitions production that can't be put into incinerators on the site. They're placed on wooden pallets, which are soaked with diesel fuel before igniting. The reason that this is considered a primitive practice is that effective contained burn technologies exist, made in the USA. Federal regulations going back to 1988 require the DOD to use alternative disposal methods when they become available. They've been used by our NATO allies and others worldwide for over 15 years. And what this does is it reduces daily releases of tons of toxins down to grams of releases of toxins. And just more examples from the EPA's report of low technology handling of so We have a site that's within 100-year floodplain, 100 feet from a navigable waterway, next to the Pulaski Fault, and 1 mile upwind from Bellevue Elementary School. All of these conditions are specifically cited by the EPA as inappropriate for the siting of hazardous waste. Even the Army's report going back to 1995 acknowledges that the proximity of the open burning grounds to the river is already a problem. So lacking community support for follow-through on these actions has led to continuing decades of harm to our community. The Arsenal's own human health risk assessment from 2005. Here we see a map of the area within the county which is considered exposed to fallout from the open burn. This, unfortunately, this also includes all of our freshwater intakes on the New River. And you can see it reaches into Blacksburg, Price's Fork, Bellevue, obviously, and we're not even sure of the accuracy of this model. We've also found recently that we're also highest in the state in terms of fine particulate matter. This is important because fine particulate matter gets deep into tissues much more than the coarse particulate matter that the Arsenal measures, which only really measures dust and smoke. Unfortunately, Bellevue Elementary, which we mentioned is downwind, was ranked by USA Today as among the top second in the nation in terms of exposure to cancer-causing exposure to toxins. In fact, all Montgomery County schools are poorly ranked. A particular concern as far as releases into the air is lead. The bottom chart shows increased release of lead by the Arsenal. The top chart, a report from the New River Health District, reports high lead levels in the blood of children living in Radford zip codes. 0 in Pulaski, 0 in Giles, 0 in Floyd. You may ask, why are we concerned about Radford? It's because when the Arsenal was built, all the communities to the east, which are in Montgomery County, were assigned Radford zip codes. I'll just briefly mention the method the Arsenal uses is called natural attenuation, and I'll sum it up as the principle that stuff disappears through time and space. So by burying things, whether figuratively or literally, they're saying that they're going to go away. We don't have to worry about understanding how they go away. This leads Arsenal operators as recently as January of this year to make statements like, there's actually no poison that's escaping the site itself. We're seeing that the levels are going down, the controls are actually working. It's protecting human health and safety. Fine organizations like the Run of Time continue to perpetuate these types of statements, and we really need voices that can ask questions. So neither government agencies nor scientists nor engaged citizens have been able to connect all the dots and gain a complete understanding of the situation, mostly due to lack of communication and collaboration and short-sighted use of public funds by the federal and Commonwealth government. Fortunately, finally got to the good news. We're near the end. Montgomery County is blessed not only with enviable natural resources, but also with an abundance of educational institutions, medical institutions, commercial enterprises, community and faith organizations, good leadership, and other thoughtful citizens with a proven ability to work together to solve complex problems. We also have natural human resources that make us ideally poised to become an innovator in high-demand areas of expertise, such as clean technologies, environmental monitoring and modeling, and several other areas. Also good news, we have an example from last year where a community in Louisiana stopped open burning in less than 1 year by simply 1, organizing local citizens, and 2, engaging local officials to advocate for accountability from government agencies. This provides us with a leadership opportunity. Radford Arsenal's open burning permit expired last year, and the DEQ plans to renew it this summer. Taking steps towards cleaner air, water, and soil will not only improve our economic development and employment potential, while continuing to support the needs of our neighbors and nation. We seek your leadership in promoting collaboration among all community stakeholders to advocate for accountability measures from government agencies. I just wanted to point out, once Louisiana organized to do this, the EPA was actually compelled to organize and fund these efforts for community dialogue and acting on the recommendations, which ultimately ended the open burning. All right, near the end here. Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. And here are just a few recommendations for what we see as accountability measures from the government, which would greatly help our area in understanding and addressing these concerns.
I'm going to start with questions. I think I started that way, so I'm going to go with Supervisor King. Supervisor Perkins.
No, I think it is very clear what he's saying.
Supervisor Creed.
Yeah, I've got one thing. It's actually three things down into one. How much of this runoff is going through Giles Creek in West Virginia?
Well, again, it's difficult to measure with lack of access to data, but we do know that fish in the New River downstream from the arsenal, most of those species are considered inedible, and there's warnings advising not to eat them. We're also concerned by a recent comment from a Giles County official in the Roanoke Times about basically saying that the county can't handle all the dead animals they find along the New River. Again, the New River flows into West Virginia after Giles County, so again, we have a multi-state federal situation trying to be managed by a Commonwealth agency at this time. I did make an agreement with my colleagues that I would allow Ms. Bledsoe to answer the question, so I will step aside, but did I answer your question?
Yes.
Supervisor Creed?
You know, I feel like it's going in more than just one. It had to be going into West Virginia.
I regret I don't have that information, but like what I'm proposing is the collaboration among all our human resources in the county where we can work together to get answers to such questions.
I can get what I need on it.
I think on point to that, Supervisor Creed, would be that the DEQ is beginning a total maximum daily load, so a TMDL, which is a federally mandated study to determine the point sources of polychlorinated biphenyls that are in fish tissues in the New River. There'll be a meeting on that April 5th, I believe, at Radford University. So certainly the load of nitrates, which are raw oxygen from the New River, have serious impacts as they go downstream. We've released from the Radford Arsenal at least 9 million pounds of nitrates every single year since 2001. So the load is significant and has impacts downstream.
Thank you.
Supervisor Biggs.
We are going to get a copy of all of
Yes,
this.
like I said, you're welcome to keep this presentation. If there's, I'll be glad to be available to
Thank you.
help you with that.
Supervisor DeMont.
I have some questions. I've seen the health risk assessment from 2005. Have there been any significant changes in the study area surrounding the arsenal since the health risk assessment of 2005?
Yeah, the graphic that had shown the fallout zone or the receptor grid, several changes have taken place. One, there's a HUD housing complex that was built at Price's Fork in 114, which is, smack right there downwind immediately. There have been changes in zoning within Montgomery County from agricultural to residential. And those assumptions in the human health risk assessment were based on not considering people living there. One of the comments that was made in the human health risk assessment is that a subsistence farmer was unlikely, in their words, to set up a farm within the receptor grid. But we know now that Kentland Farms, since the risk assessment is situated there, as well as the dairy farm for Virginia Tech. So not only have more people and more children moved into the receptor area, but also more activities that were not given the weight that they would warrant now.
Okay. And I actually wrote a list since I knew you guys were coming. So aside from open burning, I know there's other disposal options. Do we have any idea why those disposal options are not being actively pursued by the Radford Army Ammunition Plant?
I think that's where we could get some greater clarity, Supervisor DeMont. The situation at Camp Minden was that they were told the community, so it's a National Guard base now. It used to be an ammunition plant just like ours. But the entire community was told that they were going to open burn the explosives waste there. And it wasn't until the citizens and the senators and the congressmen and the local town councils and everybody started passing resolutions and saying, hey, how can this be safe, EPA? So the EPA actually relented. They funded a community study, and sure enough, there was a solution available. It's not cheap, but B80 Systems isn't hurting for money. So
the EPA has stopped open burning. The EPA has stopped it in other areas.
EPA has the authority. This was the first example from Cab Minden. Let me just say, to respond to your question, that the unbroken pattern from the Department of Defense in dealing with communities has been that because of the components that need to be burned, that it's not appropriate for a contained burn. So they also told the folks in Minden, Louisiana, the same thing, but very quickly when they saw the community support, they just recently this month installed their contained burn unit, and they have 16 million pounds of explosives.
much of it made at Radford, by the way.
Much of it made right here, but which they will eliminate in a year, and possibly even some of that technology will be available to the rest.
It's available now, Eldorado Systems. So I think what's lacking at this point in time is clarity and transparency, and perhaps even some oversight from a disinterested party. So when the EPA canceled the open burning contract, which is a huge move to cancel a contract that's been let, then they brought in all of the DOD-approved vendors who
And you're talking about canceling the contract in Louisiana, right?
They canceled the contract for open burning. Yep, canceled it. And then in looking at all of the other options, they arrived at Eldorado Systems as being the most efficient, cost-effective. I don't know whether or not that's something that would work here. I think it's worth having, a professional person, and that's what we're asking for in the budget, to have a technical advisor. EPA does make funding available for technical advisors to review permits, but the Radford Arsenal has voted on their Restoration Advisory Board not to ask for that money. So it's really up to us to ask for that money, or to spend that money of our own, so that a technical advisor can look at the permit and give us some objective feedback on whether or not it really is protecting human health and safety, and whether or not there is another method that's available. There's professors in Virginia that could do that.
I've got just a couple of more. I appreciate all of you entertaining my questions on this. Are there any upcoming DEQ meetings that are open to the public that will discuss the open burning permit at the Arsenal?
There's not a meeting set yet. The permit, although it expired last October, is in what they call a shield status, so they're evaluating it for renewal. That's why it would be really cost effective and timely to hire a consultant to look at that permit now.
Okay.
So that by the time they roll out the community engagement piece, which typically happens 45 days before they drop the hammer and make the decision, it'd be nice to have that review of the permit request done.
Are the meetings held locally where they're easily accessible to, would they be held here? Would they be held in Richmond?
No, the meetings are held here. Interestingly, they made a recent change. They used to hold them at the Economic Development Center. Now they're at the Radford Library. But in 1995, the EPA was out here with Virginia Tech, with the Arsenal. They suggested that meetings be held at the Public Library in Christiansburg, which is more central to the exposed population. And it'd be nice if they advertised them, because last meeting, I don't know, they told us 2 radio stations they used to advertise the meeting, and I'd never heard of either one of them. Neither one was WUVT or WVTF or channel WTOB on, there's lots of free places they could advertise these meetings. And the Montgomery County website would be a great place to promote those public meetings.
So you've answered a lot of my questions, as I'm just kind of reviewing to make sure I've got answers to some of these. Are there any other stakeholder groups involved that you suggest that we reach out to or talk to? Should we talk to the commander of the Army ammunition plant? Is there anybody else that you suggest specifically that we should reach out to?
I think that'd be great. Lieutenant Colonel Alicia Mason, she is, she'll be there for another year, and I think she's really cognizant of the concerns of the community and is interested in reaching out. Originally, she had said that they would hold monthly meetings. That hasn't come to pass, but at least they're holding quarterly meetings. So there is some meetings coming up, but it's just hard to find out about them unless you're looking for it.
I'd also like to point out and answer your question that we plan to present the board with a draft resolution, a draft resolution. But we realize that that's a little premature until we have more dialogue, but it is in the hands of some of our other allies in local leadership, Planning Council, Town of Blacksburg Council. So we're hoping this will be a collaborative effort as well, something that we can all get behind.
And that-
Clean air, water, and soil is
Yeah.
something everyone can
And
get
that kind of
behind.
answers my next question is, have you had buy-in from Town Council Christiansburg, Town Council Blacksburg? Have you spoken with those folks?
You're the first body that we've come to speak to.
Okay.
But yes, we have spoken to some of our allies. We've all lived here for decades,
Yeah.
so we tend to know everyone pretty well. So
And then I
it's
want to
good be
make
on
sure,
friends.
I want to make sure this is my very last question. I want to make sure I'm clear on what you're asking for us to do. One, to consider special research into whether or not a new permit should be issued, if at all. And then two, to consider passing a resolution to oppose the open burning. Is that what you're asking?
I think that in sequence, so I think that it would be a worthwhile investment to employ a contractor to make a technical review of the permit that's being proposed now. It's available on the DEQ's website. It can be digested. The only thing that's not available right now is the drone testing that's going to take place at some undetermined time. So there's a VCU professor who contracts with EPA, contracts to look at this kind of stuff and explain it to the community. So once there's an objective expert review of the permit available to the supervisors, then it may well make sense to offer a resolution like the county and parish governments did in Louisiana, calling for an end to the open burning. But I think we're on the road to that.
Okay.
The other thing that's important that we didn't bring up, but I put on the sheet, is just the karst. I know back in 2004, the board was going to do a survey of all the karst in Montgomery County, and that's really important, not only in terms of the arsenal, but other environmental projects that can be impacted by karst. It's unusual, if you look at surrounding states, that we sit atop karst, yet we don't have it mapped in Montgomery County, and even more unusual since we have experts at Virginia Tech who could maybe do it,
All the surrounding counties are mapped except for Montgomery County.
So that would be helpful to map the karst.
Thank you both very much for entertaining all those questions. Thank you.
Supervisor Shepherd?
I think April covered it.
I have a few.
Chris, can you ask her about Virginia Tech's involvement?
Well, I
Yes.
are happy to. I was going to see if there's any follow-up questions, and so you go ahead.
Well, I just want to know, are you going to talk, where's Virginia Tech with all this?
Well, for example, right after the Flint crisis, when we recognized the valuable contribution of Dr. Mark Edwards, we contacted him asking if he could help.
I can answer that. I spoke with Virginia Tech today. I'm a PhD.
Sir, would you please state your name?
My name is Gregory Nelson. I'm a fence line resident of the Radford Army Ammunition Plant who grew up half a mile northeast of the open burning ground. I spoke to Virginia Tech today, University Relations Department. They've initiated that they will be doing rigorous testing at Kiltman Farm, given that they've relocated their dairy science facilities there recently, and they do take these concerns very seriously, and they are going to be working towards monitoring and active testing ongoing as a result of continued open burning.
Good deal.
I
Thank you.
apologize for jumping in, but
No, I just want to make sure you were part of their group. And
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a few. It looked like the burn pit is actually in Pulaski County. Am I right?
That is correct.
Okay, so it's not in Montgomery County.
That is
It's
correct.
across
The
the
burn,
river.
it's not a pit. There are actually
Or-
16 pans, clay-lined pans, that used to be flush. They used to actually sit on the riverbank, which is why the soil is so contaminated. But they were elevated in 2006. However, the prevailing winds bring all of that particulate matter immediately into Montgomery County.
And I noticed you had like a large grid. Where did that come from?
That came from Alliant Tech Systems in 2005 when the DEQ first wrote the permit for the open burning ground.
Which was
Allied
prior
Tech
to-
Systems contracted with CH2M Hill to do a human health risk assessment. So those maps are based on computer models only. There's never been any ambient air quality monitoring done in Montgomery County.
All right, and now you said your group has been very active. Have they tested some of the waters in the New River? You talk about all the dead bodies that were in the New River, that Giles County had so many dead animals that they couldn't handle it. And I haven't heard a lot about that. So what is your source for that information?
There was an article in the Roanoke Times about having to do something with the horse that washed up and was stuck in a tree, and it's really hard. There are correlations and then there's causations.
I understand. I'm just trying to get a basis for some of your presentation, because when you start talking about all these dead animals, and it sounds like something died in the flood and got washed up.
Yeah,
Well, perhaps.
I take the blame for that, because that was not in the presentation itself, but it seemed to follow on discussion. So
What's factual is that dinitrotoluene has been found in the New River. The only source of dinitrotoluene is the Radford Army ammunition plant. Toluene is a neurotoxin. The facts are that the fish in the New River downstream of the arsenal have contaminants that are likely to have come from the arsenal. So not testing just makes no sense.
to answer your question, Chairman Tuck, we don't have the resources to do our own testing.
And the reason I was asking is you said that the fish had been declared inedible
Yes, sir.
downstream.
If you look at the fish consumption warnings from the DEQ, you'll find that there are advisories against consuming fish caught in
Any
the river
fish
because
or
of-
just,
It's-
or is it a
it's
large
carp.
number?
It's a large majority of the fish species. And
Yeah, it's online. We can send you the link.
There are some fish safe to eat that don't absorb the toxins as readily as
Because
fish.
carp and catfish and things like that are bottom feeders, more likely to. Okay.
Exactly.
And I appreciate you being here, but I also wanted to know, I'm a big believer in what's the price tag. You talked about hiring an expert. Right now, I have a sheriff that I've been arguing about a $51,000 van. I see the school board out here, and they wanted $3.1 million.
Oh, heavens.
And then I just had the Chamber of Commerce ask for $1.5 million.
We're a cheap date, sir. This contractor could get to work for $5,000.
And who is this contractor?
It's called Environmental Stewardship Concepts.
And you talked about being objective. Tell me about where have they been hired by, such as the EPA, to do studies for the EPA?
Yes.
And where have they been hired by independent corporations and the like to do studies for them?
They tend to work for organizations like us. So, for instance, they were contracted by the Sierra Club when they did this analysis of the 5 drinking water wells off-site of the arsenal, and they found perchlorate in 4 out of 5 wells off-site of the arsenal. Well, that consultant said that perchlorate may well have as its point source the Radford Arsenal, and thought that it warranted more testing. He's worked, if you look at his website, I mean, he's worked all over the country.
Okay. And by the way, I live close enough to the arsenal. I hear the explosions when they're burning off. I hear the 8 o'clock whistle. I hear the midnight whistle.
And you probably know someone with thyroid disease.
You know what? I do know someone with
Sure you do.
thyroid disease.
Yeah.
But again, that didn't appear to be, that seems to be a family trait. And I noticed some of your...
Actually, thyroid cancer is one of the cancers, is one of the very few cancers that can be attributed to environmental exposure. There was a physician here who worked for Carillion Endocrinology, and when the EPA was considering adding perchlorate to the Safe Drinking Water Act in 2012, that physician, his name was Dr. Christopher Sonnier, he let the EPA know that he thought he had an unduly large patient base because of the Radford Arsenal and their release of perchlorate. Carillion Endocrinology dismissed him and closed their clinic, leaving no board-certified endocrinologist in the New River Valley. So it's a little odd that, a physician brought up a disease cluster and then we lost the specialty.
Have you asked him why he was let go?
No, I think the more important question is why did they close the clinic entirely when it was a thriving practice?
And like I said, I'm a big believer in asking lots of questions about where the information is coming from, because I thought that thyroid cancer could come from other causes, not just this one single event. And so I guess I'm under the impression that you're saying this is the only cause of thyroid cancer.
No, sir.
Okay.
No, sir. Now, there
It's
are
a contributing
people who,
factor.
Because we're Scotch-Irish, and I'm Scotch-Irish, if you get Graves' disease, who was a Scottish scientist, then the typical treatment in the United States is to zap you with some radioactive iodine, which then predisposes you to thyroid cancer later. So sometimes it's a result of treatment, but the amount of thyroid ablations that are done in the New River Valley and the amount of Synthroid that's sold in the New River Valley, the number of people with thyroid disease, and that map, incidentally, is national seer cancer data. So the rate of thyroid cancer in Pulaski is 20.4 per 100,000 people. That's almost twice the national rate. And if you go into any public meeting, like if we ask people to stand up here if they have thyroid disease or someone in their family has thyroid disease, it's not what you eat, it's not what you smoke. It's what you get exposed to, and right now science is hot on the trail of perchlorate. That's why the EPA is in the process of regulating perchlorate in drinking water. They plan to proffer a regulation next year, but so far, they wanted to do it in 2012 from what I could see, and it didn't happen.
Okay.
Sure, so I
And
just
I'm
want to
gonna
say
say
I
to you,
value your perspective on objectivity, and that's something I value very much as well. My background as an Army brat, I grew up on military bases all my life. As a chemistry whiz, my first job was testing propellants for the Naval Research Lab. I also served 6 years with the Naval, serving the Naval Support Force in Antarctica. So I've been exposed to these things. After living here 30 years, I now have pulmonary disease, pulmonary sarcoidosis, and stage 3 kidney failure. And again, we still haven't been able to connect all the dots, but I share your commitment to objectivity. I just want to reinforce that.
I know that may have triggered some follow-up questions by
Just one thing I wanted to mention, I know that you live above
I live
the
towards
area,
Walton.
so you won't have nearly as bad a record coming down as you would have if you would have been on the other end of it. If you'd have been on the bottom end of it, you'd have got a whole lot more.
Well, what happens when the plume goes up in the air, depending on the wind, it distributes the toluenes, the perchlorate, the lead, the mercury, the chromium in a broad area. And really the most at risk are children because they bear an undue body burden. So they're breathing more air, they're drinking more water, they're even ingesting dirt. So if you're 7 years old and you're getting a teeny tiny daily dose of perchlorate, you could have thyroid cancer before you're 30. I mean, that happens here, and that's unusual.
I want to thank y'all for coming. I want to, looking at our supervisor, we talked about asking perhaps someone from the Arsenal. Is everyone in favor perhaps after the budget season is up to look at bringing somebody from the Arsenal sometime in mid-April?
Sure.
I'd like to do it, and I'm certainly sensitive to the timing with budget season, but I would be interested because they're looking at renewing this permit this summer. If we could do it in the spring, that would make me happy.
So either the first meeting in April,
I'd like to do it sooner rather than later. If we,
first meeting in April, not next week, which is purely a budget meeting, but the week after, or the first
that would be great.
board meeting in April.
I'd like to see it
So we're going to
quickly.
get them on the schedule.
Yes.
Everybody,
that effort.
do I have thumbs up for that? Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very, very much.
Very good presentation.
All right.
Yeah.
Next on the agenda is work session. Is there a motion? Oh, do we need to take a break, Ms. Perkins? Do you need to take a break?
I think Mr. King was asking for a break. Yes.
I tell you what.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Yes.
All right. I tell you what. It's 8:20. I know the hour's late. I know we got a lot of folks here. Let's get back in session by 8:30. Is that 10 minutes?